This PowerPoint is going to show you the process of a muscle contracting as well as explaining the 4 types of muscle contractions found within the body. Just a couple of things to note first. So this is the sliding filament theory at a very basic level. Each muscle fibre is made up of smaller fibres called myofibrils. These contain even smaller structures called actin and myosin. These filaments slide in and out of each other, causing a muscle contraction. There's a lot of terminology within the topic, so here's a couple of the key words. Myofibrils. That's a cylinder-shaped specialized structure found within the cell, which runs the whole length of a muscle fibre. The sarcomere, the functional unit of a myofibril divided into the I, the A and the H bands. That's not relevant for this part of the topic. The actin, a thin contractile protein filament containing actin binding sites. Myosin, the thicker contractile protein filament with tropism, known as the myosin arms. Tropomyosin, an actin binding protein which regulates muscle contraction. Troponin, a complex of 3 proteins, and they're attached to the tropomyosin. On this slide you can see the stages of a muscle contraction. The first stage is there is a stimulus in the environment, for example, a ball coming at you. Then your eyes, the receptors, a sensory organ, send a stimulus which causes the sensory nerves to respond and send a signal to your brain. Your brain then sends a signal down through the motor neurons in order for the muscle to receive the message so that they can contract or extend in response to the stimulus. In this case, kick the ball away. This is called nerve transmission, also known as nerve impulse. So we're at the stage where an impulse is sent from the brain via the motor neurons. The impulse is transported along to the synapse and vesicles, where the impulse reaches the motor-muscular junction. A chemical called acetylcholine is released. This causes an impulse to be sent across the synapse to bind with the receptor sites in the form of neurotransmitter ACH. If enough impulse has been sent across the neuromuscular junction, the impulse will continue to travel and be sent down the T-tubules to the sarcoplastic bacterium where the calcium is stored. When the muscles are at rest, they become energized. This is because the ATP is broken down into an ADP and a single phosphate to supply energy for the muscle contraction. Also, when at rest, the tropomyosin and the troponin cover the actin binding sites. As you can see in the image below, the tropomyosin is what's covering the binding sites, and the troponin is then on top of that. For my muscle fibre to contract, the calcium ions need to bind with the troponin. When an impulse is in the T-tubules, this causes calcium from the sarcoplasmic bacterium to be released. When the calcium binds with the troponin, it causes it to change shape, which also displaces the tropomyosin, and now the actin binding site is available. ADP is found in energized myosin arms, and this is released, causing it to bind with the actin binding sites to form a cross bridge. The myosin pulls the actin along to glide over each other and towards the M line. This causes the Z lines to get closer, which then causes the sarcomere to shorten and contract. The myosin arms need more ATP in order to disattach from the actin binding sites and to relax. In order for the muscle fibres to stay in contraction, they need ATP to energize, but also need a constant impulse being sent to the sarcoplasmic bacterium so that the calcium are being released, which is needed to move the troponin and the tropomyosin out of the way of the actin binding sites. The final stage of a muscle contraction is the ending of the contraction. The impulse is now stopped, which means impulses have stopped reaching the sarcoplasmic bacterium, meaning calcium isn't being released anymore. This means that the tropomyosin and the troponin will turn back to their original shape and cover up the actin binding sites. Next, we move on to the 4 types of muscle contraction: concentric, eccentric, isometric, and isokinetic. Concentric and eccentric are both types of isotonic contraction. This is when muscle contracts to allow movement and the muscles change length. A kinetic contraction is where a muscle fibre shortens as it contracts. It is the most common type of contraction and happens in daily basis as well as in sporting activities. An example of a concentric contraction would be the bending of an elbow from being fully extended to fully flexed, causing a concentric contraction of the bicep brachii muscle. An eccentric contraction is when the muscle lengthens as it contracts, opposite to concentric. This type of contraction requires more control. When kicking a ball, the quadricep muscle contracts concentrically, making the muscle shorter, but the hamstring contracts eccentrically, making the muscle lengthen.